Hey everybody, it's Jacob Nordby. I'm here with Insight Events USA. I'll be your host and producer today, and Julia and her producer on her end are getting ready, but I just wanted to welcome you. I see hundreds and hundreds of you joining from all over the world, and it's so exciting. And I've been chatting with a few of you from Japan, where it's Wednesday morning, so we're talking to people from the future. That makes me very happy. Hopefully the future is looking good. Yeah, we're just so excited about this class today, and it's about a minute to the top of the hour here. Julia and I live in different places, but we're in Mountain Time, US time, so it's kind of late afternoon here. But wherever you are, we are happy that you're here. And in just a couple minutes, I'll go over some housekeeping details and introduce Julia, and we'll get going because I know that's what you're all here for. And thank you so much for being here. My God, there are so many of you. This is going to be a very, very full class, and we're excited about that. So just give me a minute here, and we'll let everyone show up, and we'll do our very best to answer questions and go through this very special class. So give me just a second. Hello again, everyone. I'm Jacob Nordby. I'm with Insight Events USA. I'll be serving as the host and producer for our special class with Julia Cameron today. I'm so happy that you're here. So I have a few housekeeping details before we get started. First of all, this is a very, very full class. We have hundreds of us all here from around the world. We want you to know that this session is being recorded. And so when we're done, we'll send a video replay of this class so you can have that and review it as often as you need to. If the audio or video gets choppy, please don't panic. The recording will be really clear. And so you can try closing the session and coming back in if you're having a little trouble. Sometimes that makes a difference. Otherwise, just please know that we'll take care of you with the recording. We'll be sending that out in about 24 hours or before after this class is over. Because we have about 500 registered today, we can't handle live questions like we normally might do in a live setting, in a conference room or something. So many of you, though, have submitted questions beforehand, and at different times Julie will cover those either in the material. So many of your questions she'll answer in the material itself, or she'll stop at some times and I'll read some questions to her. So this class is meant to be focused on the morning pages practice that's found in the Artist's Way. And the "and more" part comes because this practice ends up reaching into many different areas of life and creative endeavor. And the questions you've asked will end up taking it beyond just morning pages. So that's the "and more" part. But our intention is to serve you with something you can take away and find truly useful in your life right away. This isn't just to fill your head with knowledge. It's also so you can take away and begin a true practice or revive a practice if you've had one before. So for now, please just relax. Make sure you have your journal and pen or pencil handy so you can participate and enjoy meeting Julia. And by way of introduction, I'll be bringing her on in just a moment. Julia Cameron is credited with starting a movement in 1992 that has brought creativity into the mainstream conversation in the arts, in business, and in everyday life. She was recently hailed by the New York Times as the Queen of Change, and also commonly referred to as the godmother or high priestess of creativity. Her tools are based in practice, not theory, and she considers herself the floor sample of her own toolkit. The Artist's Way has been translated into 40 languages and sold over 5 million copies to date. You're familiar with The Artist's Way, but you may not know that Julia is the author of more than 40 books, fiction and nonfiction, poetry, songs, screenplays for movies, and theatrical plays. This session today is very personal to me, as it is to many of you. I've seen your notes. Before Julia begins teaching, I want to tell you how I discovered The Artist's Way during a personal crisis that was in the middle of the global economic crisis in 2008. My father gave me his own copy of this book that year, and I packed it up in my other things because I was moving my family to Austin, Texas after we lost our business and our house and our retirement and everything else that made sense in life. It wasn't until about a year later, though, that I dug it out of a box. And I wasn't even sure why, but I do remember my father telling me, I think this might help. So I was working this part-time job in a warehouse, and I was the only one there. And a lot of times I had long spans of time between orders. And so one day I brought The Artist's Way with me and began reading it. And then later that week began to do morning pages for the first time in my life. And you know, it changed my life. It might have even saved my life. I would sit there and write, and it felt like maybe, you know, a big glass of water to someone who was dying of thirst in the desert for me at the time. And later I learned about artist dates and began to learn how to do them. And it wasn't long, though, before I remembered my childhood dream, age 10, telling my parents I want to become a writer, and had forgotten it all of those years. Something about the practice found in The Artist's Way helped me recover that memory, and began to write my whole first book in that warehouse. So I'm telling you this because we're in the middle of another massive shakeup. I don't have to tell you that, but I can't think of a better way to reorient to your inner voice and begin a real creative recovery. And so we're so happy you're here to talk with Julia about that. And with that, let me just get back to where I have Julia and introduce my dear friend, Julia Cameron. Hi, Julia.
Hi, Jacob.
So good to see you.
Good to see you. I think you look particularly handsome today.
Oh, thank you. Your red glasses are setting off your face nicely.
Thank you. Yes, I wear my glasses as an emblem of I have no vanity, but it's a lie.
Yes. Well, it's good to see you. And Julia, you can't see this, but hundreds of people in the chat are saying hello to you right now, and that you look glamorous, and they're so happy to see you.
Well, I'm happy I look glamorous. I think it's very important that our teachers be glamorous.
Right. Well, you heard me talk about my experience with The Artist's Way, Julia, and you know, this is your class to teach, but I've had so many questions come in from people so far asking how it was that you came into the Artist's Way practice and the morning pages practice that you've taught now for so many years.
So is that a question?
I think that's a good place to start, and then I'll get out of the way.
Okay. I'm trying to think of what part of the question to answer first. And I think I should talk about The Artist's Way before we talk about morning pages, which are sort of the offspring of The Artist's Way. Okay. I was a Hollywood screenwriter, and I wrote a movie for Jon Voight. And I turned in the script, and I got a phone call that said, "This is brilliant." So I was thrilled. So then I thought, well, now we need a plan to go ahead and make the movie, not just say it's brilliant. And I tried to reach Jon Voight to make a plan, and I couldn't get him on the phone. And I tried again, and I couldn't get him on the phone. I later learned that he had a deeply codependent relationship with his producing partner who was addicted to cocaine. And cocaine was getting in between me and my script. So I didn't know this at the time. I got on an airplane and I flew from New York, where I lived, to California in order to corner Jon Voight. As I was flying, I was praying. I had a prayer practice that was like, "Oh dear God, please help me." So I was praying, "Please help me," and I heard, "Go to New Mexico." And this was before New Mexico was hip. It was just a dot on the map. So I prayed again, "Dear God, please help me." And I heard, "Go to New Mexico." So I got off the airplane and I called up my best girlfriend who lived in Los Angeles. And I said, "I've been praying for guidance and I got told to go to New Mexico." And she said, "Well, here's $1,000. Go to New Mexico." So I couldn't find John Voight, and I desperately went to New Mexico. And when I got to New Mexico, I fell in love. It was beautiful. The mountains were wonderful. And I thought I'd much rather live here than in New York. Uh, I admired the flora and fauna. So I rented a little adobe house at the end of a dirt road, and the house looked up at Taos Mountain, which was this sort of humpback marvel. And I settled into the little house, and I had a daughter who was 5 years old, and she was disgusted with me. She loved New York. She hated cows and everything that was surrounding us in New Mexico. So I started getting up in the morning early before my daughter woke up, and I would creep out to a table that looked at the mountain, and I would sit down and I would write 3 pages of early morning writing. And nobody told me to do it. I just had, well, I get what I call marching orders, which is sort of pointed guidance. So I got some pointed guidance to write morning pages. And I began writing them, and every morning I would write, I don't know what I'm doing here. I miss my career. I love the movies. I hate to give them up, but I can't have another movie go bankrupt and not get made. So I wrote pages for about 3 months, and they were just, here's the mountain today, it's wrapped in clouds. Here's the mountain today, it's clear. Here's the mountain, and I wrote more about Taos Mountain than about anything else. And what happened was one morning, I sat down to write my pages, and a character came strolling into the pages and said, my name is Johnny, you're writing a novel. And I thought, oh, there's something to these morning pages. They're giving me a path. And I thought, oh, maybe I'll follow it. So I wrote my first novel with a character named Johnny, who was a painter who lived halfway in between Taos, New Mexico, where I was living, and Greenwich Village, where I used to live. So I finished the novel, and it was getting cold, and it's much colder in Taos than it is in New York. And I found myself saying, maybe New York isn't so bad. And I got in the car, put my daughter in the car, put our poodle in the car, and I drove back to New York. And when I got to New York, I was walking one day in Greenwich Village, where I lived, on the cobblestone streets. It was very romantic. And the light from the Hudson was beautiful. And I was one more time praying. You know, I had a new novel, I was in New York, and I didn't know what to do to earn money. So I'm walking along the street praying for guidance, and I heard teach. And I thought, you've got to be kidding. I don't want to be a teacher. I want to be an artist. But the guidance was insistent. It said, teach. So then what happened is I went home and I called up my girlfriend, Regina, and I said, Regina, I've been praying for guidance and I got told to teach. And she said, well, just a minute, I'll call you back. So she got off the phone, and I'm sitting there thinking, I'm doomed to being a teacher. And I didn't know then that I would love teaching. I didn't know then that teaching would help me be an artist. that it would work hand in glove, I still thought it was just a horrible death sentence. So the phone rang, and it was Regina, and she said, "Congratulations, you are now on the faculty of the New York Feminist Art Institute," which I had never heard of. "Your first class meets Thursday." So that was the beginning of teaching the Artist's Way. I met with my class on Thursday, and it was painters, directors, actors, writers, and they were all blocked. And I thought, well, if I'm going to teach them to unblock, maybe I better give them a tool I've used. So I told them, now get up in the morning, first thing, and I want you to write 3 pages of longhand morning writing. And they thought I was crazy, but they were obedient. So they started writing morning pages, and I'm at the front of the classroom looking at the class, and I notice that they start to look a little bit different. After a couple of weeks, their faces were starting to relax. They were starting to look sort of happy. And I thought, by God, these morning pages really work. So that was the beginning. That small class at the New York Feminist Art Institute, writing morning pages. So I hope I've explained to you how they happened. It was guidance. You will write these pages. And so I did. So here's what happened. I began to teach, and I began to make a living as a teacher, and I began to hear stories. People would say, well, I started doing the goddamn morning pages, which was usually the way they were described. I started doing the goddamn morning pages, and I was a block director, and I'm directing again. Or I did the goddamn pages, now I'm writing a novel. Or I did the goddamn pages and I'm back auditioning again. And people would come to me with these wonderful stories about triumphs. And I began to think, maybe I should trust these goddamn pages. So I've been teaching them ever since, and it's been about 40 years. And I should explain probably what morning pages are, because I think some of you are doing them already, and some of you are thinking, morning pages, she keeps talking about morning pages, but she hasn't told us what they are. So morning pages are 3 pages of longhand morning writing about absolutely anything. And I think of them as a form of meditation. And I think it's difficult for Westerners to meditate. I think we have a very hard time. You're supposed to sit there for 20 minutes and do nothing. And it makes us crazy sometimes. So morning pages, you're sitting there, and instead of doing nothing, you're doing something. You're writing down what we call cloud thoughts, which are thoughts that sort of come cruising through your consciousness, relative to anything and everything. So you're doing morning pages, and you might write, I forgot to call my sister back. I hated the way Frank talked to me at that meeting yesterday. I didn't buy kitty litter. The car has a funny knock in it. So the pages skip from topic to topic. They're a little bit different from conventional journalism, journaling rather. Usually when people sit down to do a journal, they pick a topic. I'm going to write everything I feel about Fred. I'm going to write everything I feel about my mother. And you stick to the topic and you write pages and pages on the topic. Now, with Morning Pages, you don't set a topic. It's as if you have a little whisk broom, a little teeny broom, and you're poking it into all the corners of your consciousness. And they are yielding up rubble. And so you get all the sort of rubble that's in your consciousness, and you get it whisked together onto the page where you can look at it and you can do something. What happens with conventional meditation is something's bothering you and you take it into meditation. And what happens is that at the end of 20 minutes, you no longer feel like you need to do anything about it because you've meditated it away and you've gotten a higher perspective. Well, Morning Pages are about a lower perspective. And what they do is that you take a topic into Morning Pages, and at the end of writing Morning Pages, this little voice says, "You goddamn well better do something about that, don't you think?" And it nudges you. So you may take, I'll give an example. I had a student who was drunk in the Outback, and she was drinking heavily, and she started Morning Pages, and her pages said, "You were drunk last night." And she said, "Thank you for sharing," and kept right on with her day. The next day, the pages said, "You were drunk again last night." And she said again, "Well, thank you for sharing." Finally, the third day, the pages say, "Maybe you better do something about this little drinking problem." So, nudged by the pages into action, she got sober. So then I heard from her and said, "Julia, I was perfectly happy drunk in the Outback. Now I'm sober and a Hollywood screenwriter." And I'm thinking, now, is this an improvement? But of course, it was an improvement. And pages tend to move you toward action. They give you a place to expand. I think a lot of times when we have a creative dream, we scold ourselves and we say, you know, you're just getting too big for your britches. Cut it out. It's just your ego. Well, with pages, there's no little scolding voice. And let me tell you why. When you write pages, you will hear from somebody that I call the censor or the critic. And it's a voice that you're all pretty familiar with. And it always tells you, you're too big for your britches. It's just your ego. Who do you think you are? Why do you think that you are able to take this risk that you're proposing? You better stay just the way you are. So when you write pages, you'll be writing along and you'll hear this voice and it'll be critical and it'll say, oh, these pages are boring. There's no point in doing them. Why are you even trying? You're not a writer. So they tell you that, and we're used to listening to this critical voice and believing it. It's a bully, and it tries to bully us out of our dreams. But when you do morning pages and the critic starts speaking up, what you do is keep your hand moving across the page, and you say to your critic, thank you for sharing. And you keep right on doing what you're doing. And so what happens with pages is that they train you to take risks. So you start out and you're writing pages and you hear a little voice that says, wouldn't it be fun to try? And you think, I couldn't do that. And then you go and you write pages again another day, and the pages say, I really think it would be wonderful fun to try. And you hear it and you think, I just can't do that. So then you keep writing pages and they bring it up again. Let's say it's writing music. Wouldn't you love to write music? And you find yourself saying, all right, God damn it, I'll try. And you begin writing music. And when you try, you find that many of the things that you thought were beyond your reach are actually well within your reach. I used to teach in Chicago, and Chicago is a city where many of the rooms have beautiful pressed tin ceilings. They're just wonderful. But Chicagoans decided the ceiling is too high, and they hung a scaffolding and they put styrofoam on the scaffolding so that it was about 10 feet lower. And you would walk into a room and you would think, oh, this ceiling is a little bit low. And when you do morning pages, it's as if you're in Chicago and you're underneath the styrofoam ceiling, and you take a broomstick and you poke the styrofoam to one side, and it moves to one side, and you see, lo and behold, there's another 10 feet before you get to the tin ceiling. So this is how pages work with you. You find yourself saying, I don't have a gift. I have a dream, but I have no gift. And what happens is that you start writing pages and you're poking at the ceiling and you hear, well, maybe you should just try. So I sometimes get asked, Julia, aren't you afraid you're unblocking a lot of bad art? And I have thought about this. And I ended up going back to the person and saying, actually, my experience is just the opposite. I find that a lot of people who were blocked are actually wonderful artists. And they didn't receive the critical nurturing to know that they were artists. As they were growing up, if they said, I think I'd like to try writing, their parents said, oh, sweetheart, don't you think you might need something to fall back on? Which is not what they would say if you said, I'm thinking of being a banker. So many artists are discouraged by their parents or their teachers, and they have, well, let's say, I'm thinking of woman now named Sheila. And Sheila is a very gifted therapist. But she had been doing therapy for 15 years, and she realized that it wasn't her dream. Her dream was to be a writer. So she started doing pages, and the pages, what happens, they're not for writers only, but they do make writers have more ease. So you write the pages, and then what happens is your other writing becomes a possibility. So she wrote children's books. And now she's a therapist who doesn't depend on her therapy for her identity anymore. So I feel like I haven't said something very important, which is that morning pages, the 3 pages of longhand morning writing, you do them first thing in the morning. And Jungians tell us that we have about 40 minutes before our ego wakes up. So what you're trying to do is catch your consciousness before your defenses are in place. So if you do morning pages, they move you into authenticity because you're saying how you really feel, not how you should feel, not how you officially feel, but how you actually feel. And you do them daily, first thing in the morning. It's important to do them in the morning. If you do pages at night, you're writing about a day you've already had and you're powerless to change. So you do them in the morning, first thing, and you catch your consciousness before it has its defenses up. And you write with candor. And this is why it's important that pages are shown to no one. They're for your eyes only. And it's because pages give you a safe place to vent. So you may find yourself saying, I hate Fred. And the truth is, you love Fred, but you're temporarily hating Fred because of a fight you had the night before. So you say, I hate Fred. And if you show pages to Fred, Fred says, oh my God, she hates me. I thought she loved me. So you don't want to show your pages to your intimate others. I've had people hide them. I've had people shred them. I've had people put them under the mattress. I've had people lock them in the Volkswagen car. The important thing is that they're strictly for your own consciousness. So I think it's important to say that pages are like sending a telegram. When you write pages, you're contacting the universe and you're saying, this is what I like, this is what I don't like, this is what I want more of, this is what I want less of. And you're sending out a wire to the universe and telling it your precise position. So I think it's important to say that pages are a place for candor, pages are a place for safety, pages are a place for venting. And I've sometimes had people say, oh, Julia, I started writing pages, but I was sad. And I say, well, sometimes I think we should call them mourning pages, MOURNING R-N-I-N-G, because often when you brush off your buried dreams, the brushing off of them causes a wave of sorrow, and you go through the sorrow, and you emerge on the other side stronger. I want to say sillier. I think it's important to say that pages are not all serious. Sometimes they say, wouldn't it be fun? Wouldn't it be fun? I had something happen. I had been writing pages about 15 years. So you would think I had ventilated everything. But I was writing pages, and the pages said, wouldn't it be fun to write radiant songs? And I thought, screw you. If I were the least bit musical, I'm 45 years old. If I were the least bit musical, I would know it. Well, the pages persisted. Wouldn't it be fun to write a musical about Merlin? You will be writing radiant songs. And again, I thought, oh, God, go to hell. Don't raise my hopes. Music was a dream that was way above the styrofoam ceiling. So I was teaching, and I was teaching in the Rocky Mountains. And I was staying with a girlfriend, and I said to her, you know, I've been praying, again, as usual, and I've been doing my pages, and my pages tell me that I'm going to be writing music. And I said, this is impossible. I am the non-musical one in a very musical family. So she said, why don't you go sit down by the creek? And I went down the mountain from her house to a Rocky Mountain creek, which was making a beautiful rippling sound. And I sat on a big rock, and I was sort of half-assed meditating. And all of a sudden I heard, my green heart is filled with apples. Your dark face is filled with stars. I am the one that you've forgotten. You are the one my heart desires. So dance when you think of me, sing to remember me, sing till your heart can see who we are. Dance when you think of me, sing to remember me, sing till your heart can see who we are. And I went, oh my God, it's a song. And I went racing back up the mountain, and I found my girlfriend, and I said, listen to this. I was told I was going to write music, and I think I just heard my first song. And she said, here, sing it into this. And she had a little Radio Shack tape recorder. So I sang it into that, and I thought to myself, you know, Julia, you've been going 15 years writing morning pages. You would think by now you would trust them. So what ended up happening is that I've now written 2 full-length musicals, and I love writing music. And it was a talent that I considered far beyond my reach. So I have had people say to me, Julia, I want to be a sculptor, and I'm a judge. And I, I dream of sculpting, but then I think, don't be an idiot. You're a judge. So this is my friend Richard. So Richard started doing morning pages. The pages kept saying to him, well, just try it. He went, he got some clay, he brought the lump of clay home, and he started sculpting. So it's now 10 years later, and Richard has had shows of his sculpture. And again, he thought, see, a lot of times when the morning pages suggest something, we get like Richard and we say, I'll look like an idiot. And we're afraid of, quote, looking like an idiot. And the fear of how we will be perceived often is a block that gets in the way. And what happens with pages is that the pages become our witness, and they become the person that we have to please. So I don't know how long I've been talking.
Well, everyone is hanging on every word, Julia, so you can keep talking or you can, what do you feel like doing now?
Maybe we should do a couple questions. How long have I been talking?
Well, we've been doing about 40 minutes right now, so you're just on
goodness.
fire. Right.
This is what happens. You start me talking about morning pages, and I slip into passion, and I find myself wanting to tell you stories, but I think we'll pause right now and maybe take a couple of questions from you. Jacob, can we do that?
We sure can. And just so you know, Julia, I wish you could see all the chat. It's almost like this great big standing ovation happened after you got done singing. Everyone loved hearing you sing. You know, a lot of questions are coming in about some specifics, and there's some other sort of bigger picture questions, but I would like for you to address, you know, is there a certain size of paper? Oh, and everyone wants to know, do you still do your morning pages now?
In this journal, there you have the morning pages.
Right?
I do still do my morning pages, and I still grapple. I want to say a word again about the censor or the critic that speaks up to you when you're doing your pages. I have a critic. I've had the same critic since I was 18 years old. His name is Nigel. And Nigel is a gay British interior decorator. And nothing that I ever do is good enough for Nigel. So to answer your question about the size of paper, a lot of times people think, I'll just use little paper. And they think they're being very clever. But what happens when you use a small size paper is that you miniaturize your thoughts to match the format. And it keeps you from expanding into your more expansive, more abundant self. So I say do 8.5 by 11. And sometimes people say, well, Julia, is it supposed to be 3 sides of 3 pages? And I go, no, that would be 6 pages. That's a nightmare. So it's 1 side, 1 side, 1 side. Was that your question about the size of paper?
That was one. We have one about lined or blank paper. Do you have any preference there?
I think lined is better. I think, again, this has to do with our tendency to want to cheat. We think, oh, if I do unlined paper, I can write bigger. And writing bigger is not the answer. Filling 3 pages of lined paper is what works.
We also get a lot of questions so far about 3 pages and how long it should take, and what if it takes me so long? Can you give us some sort of practical details about that and how to sort of handle that?
Well, I want to say I have a tool for you. It's called Morning Pages, and it's a nightmare. uh, it takes between 20 and 45 minutes usually. Some people are very quick. They write very rapidly, and they're done in 20 minutes, which is tremendous. Other people take what I call mental cigarette breaks. And so they're writing along, and then they pause to think about what they've just written. And that pause elongates the time it takes to write the pages. And they may find they take 45 minutes. I've had people say, Julia, it takes me an hour. And I want to say, you have to focus on the reward of the pages. And the reward of the pages starts to show up within 2 or 3 weeks. I I just had a terrible experience. I had an interview with a woman for the Sunday London Times, and she wrote that I was a whiskey swilling hack and plagued by mental illness. And I thought, God, I thought I was pretty stable. You have to be pretty stable to write 40 books. And at the end of this article, which was very favorable about Morning Pages and just very catty about me, she said, I've been doing Morning Pages for a week now, and I find my other writing is much easier. So I thought, oh, even the cynics among us have to admit that very rapidly they start to feel a shift for the better. Question?
Yeah, Julia, we have some questions about, I'm a night person and mornings are not good for me, or I work, during a really early shift and can't really get to it until later. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I have to say a couple things. They are called morning pages, not evening pages. And they do something profoundly different. If you do them in the morning, you're laying out your track for the day, and you're going to see many little choice points during your day where you can steal time for creativity. And if you do them at night, you're reflecting on a day you've already had. And for the people who say, Julia, I have to get up early, I have to say, well, now you have to get up even earlier. So I sometimes get asked, Julia, I have small children, and I can't get to the pages right away. And so I find myself saying to these mothers, do them as soon as you can. Try and get up before the kids if you can. I did that with my daughter. And if you can't get up before the kids, try to get to them as early in the day as you possibly can. So there's no evading the fact that they work best if you do them first thing in the morning.
Julia, I'm seeing a number of questions, and you touched on it during your story about how they came to be, but about how to hear more clearly hear the voice of the universe, the voice of the inner desire using morning pages?
Well, I want to say, first of all, if you're doing morning pages, you will automatically come in touch with your intuition and what you want to call the voice of the universe. It's impossible to do morning pages and not make contact with the inner source of guidance. And you begin to become more autonomous. And I have a trick that I do, which is I ask for guidance. I do it at the end of my pages. I say, LJ, that's for little Julie, little Julie, what do I need to know about X? And I pose my question, and then I listen. And sometimes the answers seem very simple. And sometimes, well, I'll give an example. I was married in my 20s to a man I was madly in love with. And we had a terrible divorce. And it was 10 years later, and I was still madly in love with him. And we were divorced, and he'd been married several times more in the meanwhile. So I thought, this is terrible. You are a hopeless codependent. And I took it to guidance. And I said to the guidance, LJ, little Julie, what should I do about loving him? And I listened, and I heard, just love him. And I thought, well, that's awfully simple. I'm not supposed to fight my feelings. And the guidance repeated, just love him. So now it's 42 years since we got divorced. And I have to report that sometimes in my morning pages, I will pray for him and his fifth wife, that they have love and harmony. And that's the answer to the question of what do I do about loving him? Just love him.
Julie, here's one, getting some insight into how I can overcome my blocks and insecurities and make the leap from pages to doing the things my heart desires. For me, I write a lot of things I'd love to do, but still not doing them due to my insecurities. Will that improve in time?
Yes. Yes is the short answer. But I think we're coming up on something else that I need to talk about, which is there is a companion tool to morning pages. So maybe this is the morning pages and more. And that's called an artist date. And an artist date is a once a week solo expedition to do something that interests or enchants you. So you set aside like an hour or 2 hours time, and you make a plan to do something festive, something enjoyable. So this is not when you take a new computer class. This may be when you go to a children's bookstore, or I have a favorite artist date to go to a pet store where they have a pet bunny that they let you pet, George. So I like to go visit George, and it always cheers me up. So what happens is that you do your morning pages and you're sending, and you're saying, this is what I like, this is what I don't like. And then once a week, you're going out and you're doing something self-nurturing. And when that happens, it's as if you have switched the dial from it was on send with morning pages, And now with Artist Dates, it's on receive. And you begin to have a sense of a more benevolent universe. And this is what happens, is that things that previously seemed too risky, which is where the question came from. You know, I have dreams, but I'm afraid to try them. When you take Artist Dates, you begin to realize that there isn't a risk in trying them. There's a risk in not trying them.
There's a lot of questions coming in right now, Julia, about what do we do about artist dates during quarantine and social distancing?
This is when you get creative. An artist date in regular times is an expedition outside of the house. An artist date during quarantine is when you do something festive solo inside your house. And it can be something very simple. It can be listening to a piece of music that you don't let yourself listen to. It can be, well, what I've been doing is sketching. I have what I call a God jar. It's a porcelain jar twined with dragons. And I love my God jar. And I put my wishes, hopes, and dreams into the God jar. And later on, I open it up, take it out, and go, oh my God, I have an answered prayer. So what I'm doing during quarantine is I'm sketching the God jar. And it's reconnecting me to how much I love that object and to my memories and associations with it. So you might want to listen to a podcast that had seemed too silly. You might want to sketch. You might want to make soup. You might want to bake something. I have a girlfriend who is decorating her fingernails with Swarovski crystals. And she sends me emails with pictures of her fingernails and says, see, this is my artist date.
I'm also getting one here, Julia, about your belief. She said, Raluca says, hello, I'm so happy to be part of this. Thank you so much for it. I would like to ask if you believe that morning pages is the base of awakening the creative part in people, or these need to be combined with stimulant activities. And I'm hearing, do you believe that all people are creative and morning pages is a way to get back in touch with that?
So the first part of the question is, do you believe that all people are creative? And that is an absolute yes. Yeah. I have yet to meet a non-creative person. I've met people who are blocked, who are fearful, who are anxious, who are intimidated, but not non-creative. Do I believe that morning pages are the way to awaken creativity? Yes. Do I believe that doing morning pages in conjunction with artist dates creates sort of a spiritual ham radio kit? Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm.
You know, I see a bunch of questions, Julia, that I feel like some talk about your exercise in the Artist's Way, blasting through blocks, might be really useful. Can you tell us about blasting through blocks?
Well, with pleasure. Blasting through blocks is in the Artist's Way, and it's way at the back of the book. And it's a cure for procrastination. And it's a cure for the question that we had earlier about I'm afraid to take risks. And what blasting through blocks is, you get a sheet of paper and you write your angers and your fears, your resentments. about doing a piece of work. And I recently did an interview with Russell Brand, and I talked about blasting through blocks, and he got all excited. And he said, I can tell that's going to work, because he had said, I have multiple projects and I'm procrastinating, and I don't know what to do about procrastination. And the answer to what to do about procrastination is blasting through blocks.
So just remind us, what's the very simple process? So you write down, I'm trying to do this, and then you write down what about it, Julia?
You write your fears. All right, so I'm trying to finish a book and I'm stalling. And I go to blasting through blocks and I go, what are my fears about finishing this book? I'm afraid it won't be any good. Mm-hmm. I'm afraid it will be good, but nobody will know it. I'm afraid my editor will tear it apart and make me rewrite it. I'm afraid that it's boring. So you list all your fears, and then you list your angers. And your angers might be, I don't want to turn it into this editor, he always nitpicks. I don't want to turn it into this editor, he's negative. I don't want to turn it into this editor, he takes too long to read. It'll be 6 months before I hear anything. So you write down your fears and your angers, and then in a perfect world, you have something that I call a believing mirror. And a believing mirror is a person who believes in your strength and your possibilities. And the believing mirror is somebody who says, if you say, I'm writing a novel, they say, that's fantastic. They don't say, do you have a publisher? So you have a believing mirror, somebody who believes in you unconditionally. And you call up your believing mirror and you say, can I just read you my list of resentments and fears? And they don't have to fix it, they just have to listen. And you share your blasting through blocks exercise, and then you start your project.
I was asking that in particular for one person who sent in a question saying that she had started painting and just completely froze and wondered if morning pages might help. So I asked that on her behalf, and many other questions that came in. Yeah.
She's painting and she's frozen and she wants to know if morning pages will help. Mm-hmm. I think they definitely would help.
Yeah.
I think they definitely would help.
It's interesting, Julia. I started racing off on morning pages long before I finished the book and didn't know about blasting through blocks because, as you say, it's right at the end. And when I found that tool, it was as if I found a whole other friend to help me out because that was really a great enhancement, I felt. Another question is, should we read our pages?
This is a good question. I tell people, don't read them for 8 or 9 weeks and be prepared to be bored. Because when you read your pages, they are frequently boring, but occasionally they'll have a sparkling idea. Mm. So I say read it with a couple different colors of magic markers. And when you have a sparkling idea, make it fuchsia. Mm. The reason people wonder about should they read their pages is that they don't trust the process. The process is that if something is important, the pages are a tough love friend and they will bring it up over and over and over again. So you don't need to worry that if you don't reread them, they won't keep mentioning it. So You have to trust that the pages have your best interests at heart, and that they will be a tough love friend, and they will bug you if it's something important that you're ignoring. So what we're trying to do is move into action, not into introspection. And what happens if people say, should I read the pages right away? It moves us toward narcissism. And I should say here, it's important to stop your pages at 3 pages. If you keep on writing after 3 pages, you're moving into narcissism. And you want instead to be moved into action.
And I keep getting a number of questions here, and I feel like what you just said addresses it, but to rephrase, my morning pages just seems like a lot of grousing, whining, moaning, all those sorts of things. Is that normal?
Yes. Yes.
Also, a lot of questions, Julia, about I've started morning pages, I did them for some years, I've fallen off. How do I regain my passion for it? How should I start again? How should I make it a practice?
Well, I want to say get up in the morning and write them. And don't worry, don't take your emotional temperature about it. Don't say, I have to be as passionate now as I was in the beginning. Just do the pages.
Yeah. We have Laura says she had a severe head injury a couple of years ago. She's been writing morning pages for 10 years and very creative, just getting started again after all this time. Anything you can recommend in terms of recovery?
I'm not sure what the question is. It sounds like she's writing pages. Mm-hmm. She's on the path of recovery. Mm-hmm. The pages are leading her forward. They're hopefully giving her optimism. And there is no shortcut. It's 3 pages. There is no special trick, except I would urge her to try the guidance. L little Laura, is it?
Yes, Laura.
Yeah, little Laura, and ask, what can I do to further recover? And then listen for the guidance. I find that guidance can be very specific and very grounded and also very surprising. So I recommend to everyone to try it, but particularly to Laura.
Mm-hmm. There's also several questions coming in about, do you have to get right out of bed and without going to the bathroom or getting coffee or talking to your partner, get right to the pages? How do you feel about that?
Well, those are several questions.
Yes.
So I wouldn't stand between a person and racing to the bathroom. I think partners can be trained. And I actually have a story about that. A man named Timothy was doing morning pages, and we would check in every week. How many days did you do it? And he kept doing 7 out of 7, 7 out of 7, 7 out of 7. And then one week he came in and we said, well, Timothy, how did you do? And he said, oh, 0 out of 7. And we said, Timothy, what happened? You fell off the wagon. You were doing so well. And he said, well, I got a new lover. So I want to report that pages are contagious, and very often the significant other will start doing pages in a response, a defensive response to your doing pages. And I think it's important not to stand between someone and a cup of coffee. So I should say I'm a little bit of a fanatic. I make my coffee the night before. I put it in the refrigerator. I get up in the morning. I race to the bathroom, to the refrigerator, to the coffee. I drink iced coffee for morning pages.
I'm scrolling back. There's so many popcorn questions coming in right now. There's, it seems like we touched on this, but question, is it necessary to handwrite, or can typing on the computer be okay?
It's necessary to handwrite. I think it's important to say that when you write by computer, a lot of times you can go faster, so you get speed and distance, but you don't get the same depth. When you write by hand, aggravating as it is, it slows you down, and you find yourself saying, this is precisely how I feel. So you become more authentic. Writing by hand yields you a handmade life.
Yeah, I read some psychological information on that one time, and it talks about being a pattern interrupt and accessing a whole different part of the brain and experience. What about, here's one, what if someone has a disability to write? What about recording a voice or something?
Is the question I am unable to write?
Yes.
I don't have any experience with this. I want to say recording might work, but I don't know that it works. I've never tried it. So I can't give you a definitive answer to that.
Yeah. Well, Julia, we're about an hour and 12 minutes, 15 minutes here, and everyone is just delighted to be with you today. I wonder if you just have anything from your heart for all of us facing a changing world and reorienting to our inner voices and looking for guidance forward.
So your question is, what do we do with the pandemic?
Yeah.
The answer is, I think for a lot of us, it's enforced introspection. We are having enforced solitude, and I think it's an ideal time to start morning pages because they give you a way to channel your solitude. I want to say there are 10 tasks at the end of each chapter of The Artist's Way. So that's 120 different diversions. And doing those tasks is creating optimism. I feel like what we need right now is optimism. And we need something that we can do daily. It's important during this time to find some sense of structure. Otherwise, we have this vast array of time and solitude, and it can make us a little bit crazy. So having a pattern of morning pages and a pattern of artist dates puts us in touch with a sense of benevolence. I haven't talked about the fact that I believe that creativity and spirituality go hand in glove. and that as you work on your creativity, your spirituality factor goes way up. And if you work on your spirituality, your creativity factor goes way up. So I think I want to say, use these tools and be prepared to be contacted by a benevolent something. And this benevolent something is something that you can depend upon.
Well, Julia, I feel that this is a great place to stop. And I just want to thank you for agreeing to join us today for this special video conference. I know you don't do very many of these sorts of things, so it's just been a pleasure to see your face. I know everyone is chatting, saying how happy they are to have seen you today and spent time. So thank you so much for doing this.
Well, thank you. And thank all of you for coming.
Well, we're just getting a flood of thank yous. And so we'll let that kind of roll on for a moment here. And for everyone listening, just be aware we will send out the replay for this. So we'll take care of you in that way and make sure you're in great shape. And I just want to say on behalf of Insight Events and myself, we love you. Thank you for being here. We need you. And I can't wait to see you again. We'll make sure and stay in touch by email and other ways. Thank you, Julia.
You're welcome.
Have a great night.
Thank you.